views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, it's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is the program where we talk to Bronx journalists, Bronx editors, Bronx writers, sometimes Bronx photographers, give you a little insight as to what's going on in the borough of the Bronx, and more importantly, what's going on inside the minds of all those people who are writing and taking pictures and doing all those things that we read and hear and talk about. So tonight we have two great guests. They've been on the show before, and I'm sorry you weren't here earlier because we had a very fertile discussion about what's going on in the Bronx and politics and elsewhere. And so it's my pleasure in the studio to welcome the editor of the Norwood News, David Cruz. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Thank you, Gary.
And all the way down there on 47th Street via Skype is our longtime friend and colleague, one-time assemblyman, although that's in the past. It's Michael Benjamin from the New York Post editorial board. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Glad to be here, Gary. Thank you.
Actually, Michael, David's going to wait a moment. We're going to start with you. Let's talk about the process that brought us Corey Johnson as the city council speaker. There's no question that it's been widely publicized that the county leaders, Marcos Crespo and Joe Crowley in Queens, are the ones who essentially selected the council speaker. New York Post and you have had some interesting thoughts on that. Why don't you share that?
Well, Bronx Congressman Joe Crowley was the first to say that he was gathering 26 votes, and he had 26 votes for the next Speaker of the City Council, and it turned out to be Corey Johnson. He and the Bronx County leader, Assemblyman Marcos, and they cobbled 26 votes for Corey Johnson, and are able to get selected members of the Bronx delegation and the Queens delegation to head rather important committees. I believe Crespo was able to get Rafael Salamanca posted as the new chairman of the Land Use Committee, which is vital to development here in the Bronx and across the city. And Joe Crowley got Danny Drum, a Queens council member, as the new chair of the Finance Committee. And historically, the Queens Democratic organization has always tried to get control of either land use or the Finance Committee. 4 years ago, Jalissa Ferreras, a Queens member, was the chair of Finance, and had she remained in the council, she probably would have been the Speaker of the City Council.
The process, we're satisfied with this process. We don't like this process. It is what it is. I mean, political trading, it wouldn't be the first or last time it's ever done. And frankly, now we can't tap into your experience as an assembly member. Is there a lot of pressure? Let's say you didn't agree with the choice of Corey Johnson, but there's not much you can do, right? If Marcos Crespo says to a council member, this is where we're going, you go with it, right?
Well, in the Bronx, because many members of the delegation are, in a sense, regulars. They're part of the party apparatus, so they would go on. They would agree. First, it's not Crespo's fiat. The members do discuss what's best for the Bronx and for the members themselves, and then they come to a consensus. I believe they probably discussed Corey Johnson, who had been very visible in a number of elections here in the Bronx. He worked the borough. He worked the Bronx. He worked Queens. He worked where he had to work. He out-hustled the other candidates who seem to be running simply on the basis of the fact that they're African Americans, and there was time in their minds that they needed to be a black speaker of the council, not that they were out hustling Corey Johnson or understanding the dynamics of the politics. Queens has historically always wanted one of the two powerful posts, either the land use or finance. 4 years ago, newly elected Mayor de Blasio cut out the Bronx and Queens, and they were determined, I believe this time, not to have a repeat of 2013. And they successfully, in their minds, outmaneuvered the mayor. Elevated Johnson, and also got their guys, the spots that they wanted, and as well as possibly having the ins on some of the patronage posts that exist down at the city council.
Well, the trading largely relies on committee chairmanships, and I got to tell you, Michael, that was expert analysis, and you really nailed it down. Let's bring David Cruz into the dialogue. Before we break down which Bronx council members got which chairmanships, Corey Johnson, unlike Melissa Mark Viverito, it looks like he's going to challenge the mayor. The mayor's comfort level is not going to be as high with this city council. Just your thoughts on kind of a new look at this mayoralty.
Well, obviously, yeah. It looks like I can only speak for the Bronx. It looks as if the two new council members who will be joining, who are part of the council, Mark Jonai and Diaz,
Reverend Diaz.
Right, Reverend
Senior,
Diaz. Senior, right.
Junior's got his own job.
They've already essentially opposed the mayor on a number of issues, and so it seems as if this is just, de Blasio sort of bracing himself, knowing that he may have to deal with a very, very contentious city council, so he's sort of having to sort of suck it up.
And maybe we ought to credit the city council, because if you take the temperature, as all three of us do, as media people, the mood about Mayor de Blasio, yes, he was reelected. We know what the numbers showed. But it's out there that there's a lot of people dissatisfied with a number of things that the mayor is doing.
Well, look at the voter turnout, too. It wasn't that great. Anyway, people were pretty much turned off by the candidates in general. I mean, I think it was still one of the lowest, or one of the lower voter turnout contests in recent memory.
Mm-hmm. And we'll bring Michael in on this discussion too. You mentioned the land use. That's a good spot for Councilmember Salamanca, considering all the development that's going to, and the decisions that development is going to mean for his district in the South Bronx. That's a good spot for a Bronx council member in general. But I think, given what's going on, let's say, the Harlem River, that big development there. You've got the Somerset project a little further south. You've got all the questions about the waterfront as you move east. Michael, that's a good spot for Councilmember Salamanca.
It's a good spot for him. It's a good spot because of his, number one, because of his skill set. As a former district manager, all the years he spent as district manager at Community Board 2, he developed, I believe, expertise in land use procedures. And that's important to have that knowledge as you go ahead and execute your role as land use chairman, and not necessarily captured by the land use staff who also have major expertise. It's important, yes, for the borough's development, maybe for his own district, but it's good to have somebody from the borough who understands how it operates and can try to get the best possible for community residents who have concerns about being forced out and getting concessions that are important. And mostly land use decisions are made by the council, and the council members vote along with the interests of a particular district's council member. They don't impose themselves on a district. And the mayor is going to have to learn, and he'll learn that lesson. The other issue you have,
the other
issue you have is that the mayor is a lame duck mayor. And so there isn't a lot that he can do or power that he can wield. Yes, he has the power of the budget, but the members of the council know that he's a lame duck, and many of them are also themselves lame duck, preparing themselves for their next political office if they choose to run for another office. And so they're also doing their own political posturing to prepare themselves for another office.
I'm going to ask you, Michael, and then we'll ask David Cruz a similar question about Councilmember Richie Torres, who had a high-profile, as a freshman, had a high-profile position in the previous council with Melissa Mark Viverito. Now they've created a new a committee called Oversight and Investigations, which he is going to chair. Going back to what we had asked David before, this looks like a direct hit on the mayor to make sure that things go well. And, maybe you could put, NYCHA heating right at the top of the list as among the things that are going to get looked at. David, stand by. You're getting the same question. What are your thoughts on Richie Torres getting a new committee?
That's a good spot for him. He seems a media darling. He seems to have some depth of knowledge. There's no doubt about that. It's easy pickings in this administration to find things to investigate. I hope we will investigate the renewal program and how that's been a major failure across the city. And, and look at, of course, you look at the public safety at the NYCHA buildings and public housing. But, the councilmen and other members of the council need to look at themselves as well, because they had all this capital money. They could have put it into the boilers at the developments in their district, and necessarily waiting for the mayor to do it. So, so it's a little bit of hypocrisy, if not hubris, on the part of Torres and the others to write a letter to the mayor demanding that he do something about the boilers when they themselves have a pot of capital dollars they could have used for boilers instead of putting it into other kinds of projects around the development in their district.
I'm smiling because, listen, nobody forgives this as an acceptable way to treat any tenants. But this problem didn't develop overnight. It wasn't like all of a sudden on November 18th all the boilers in NYCHA exploded. What are your thoughts about Richie Torres being in that spot as, in a way, the chief investigator, the chief overseer? Because normally we get it from either the public advocate or the controller.
Or the Department of Investigations.
Or the Department of Investigations. Now the city council is saying we're going to take control. I think it's a good thing.
I think remember, Torres did run for the speakership race. It sounds like it was a committee that was solely created for him, and it gives him broad oversight, a lot of powers. He could essentially hold these joint conferences and just to begin looking into the government agencies, left, right, and center. So,
Dave, you've done a ton of wonderful coverage about some very difficult issues, about the bad landlords, about boilers going bad, about people living in substandard conditions. Do you have a finger to point at somebody? Michael suggested, well, you know what? The council should look at itself and its own funding procedures. Is the problem in NYCHA? Is it the mayor not making them do? I mean, how do we solve this, and who gets, I guess, the blame? Not that I want to play the blame game, but I guess I do.
I mean, the thing is, it's really hard to just have a council just begin bringing in landlords and asking them what the state of their buildings are. I mean, I don't even know what kind of legal authority they have with respect to chiding landlords. The council, anyway. I think an enforcement agency would have to look into that.
Well, so maybe now the investigations will get us to some sense.
But Gary, there's one thing missing.
Yeah.
But there's one thing that's important to look at. Having yet seen the rules governing the investigation committee, one of the issues that council members have always had is that they don't have subpoena power. The investigation committee oversight is only useful if you have subpoena power and you can subpoena people to come in and give testimony. As it is, the council's committees already have oversight over various agencies. The one thing they're lacking is subpoena power, subpoena records, and to then require the commissioners to answer, quote unquote, truthfully about issues.
I love that, because you can show up at a hearing and you don't have to tell the truth.
Oh no, they have to tell the truth. But usually they show up and if they don't want to give you an answer, they'll say, "Well, we'll send you the answer, somewhere down the road." Yeah. And that's always been, their safety valve. The committee can also just wind up writing reports, which will gather dust. Well, they'll get you a headline for a day or two, and then it's going to gather dust. Nothing really gets done. So let's see what happens.
It makes it meaningless at the end of the day.
Yeah, and what that is really, if that's the way it turns out, is basically repeating what the public advocate does. I mean, listen, I'm gonna run down before we're going to take a break. I'm going to run down the list of other Bronx council members. I hope I get it right, just so people will know who got what. Andy Cohn will be the chair of the State and Federal Legislation Committee. The newest member, and that's what David was referring to earlier, Mark Jonai, will be in charge of the Small Business Committee. Reverend Diaz got, what was the name of the committee?
For Hire Vehicles.
For Hire Vehicles. I don't even know what that's. I'm assuming he's pretty happy with that. I couldn't tell you.
It could be Uber oversight.
Uber oversight. Yeah. Well, there you go. Let's see. Andy King, I thought this was interesting, got juvenile justice. Vanessa Gibson will be chair of the capital projects. We mentioned Salamanca, and Fernando Cabrera will get the chair of the governmental operations. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a short break. Both will be back. David Cruz and the New York Post have done writing about the situation at Junior High School 80, and we're going to try and sort out what might or might not be going on at that school, among other things, after we come back from a break. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa! Master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Oh my God, girl! Oh, Shane, look out!
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Back with you in the Bronx Buzz. We're having a good time on camera and off camera. I can't tell you about all this stuff we're talking about. But David Cruz, the editor of the Norwood News, is here. And down there, one of the members of the editorial board of the New York Post, our good friend Michael Benjamin, is on Skype. David, I want to start with you. Maybe we should really, well, we'll give Michael a chance to rebut, so to speak. The New York Post ran an expose about Junior High School 80, and it was ironic because the things they were alleging would suggest that the school should be made a renewal school, et cetera, yet it was made, it was kept on instead of being closed, one of the schools on the rise. You read the story in the Post and said there's a lot of allegations, and then you did a follow-up that interviewed parents or teachers.
Right, both.
And they were like, you know what, this story is not all that it's cracked up to be. So we'll start with David, and Michael, you know, we're coming to you in a minute.
Right. I personally went over there. I had another reporter also go over there too. And they were, I mean, the Audie Tower was one who went to the school initially and spoke to parents, and they had general complaints, but they didn't come out and say it's not as bad as the Post made it out to be. And then afterwards, I went the same day, but I went in the evening. I spent like an hour and a half outside the school, and I spoke to teachers. Just about 7 teachers really came out. I spoke to them. 6 of them didn't want to go and give me their names. One did, but they all praised the school.
They praised the school.
Praised it. And the thing is, I was thinking to myself, okay, it kind of boils down to he said, she said. The numbers are not wrong. The school is definitely not doing well academically, but the numbers have improved, and there has been a lot of money, millions of dollars poured into the school to get it out of the renewal school list and put it on a rise status. But even so, the principal, he came out and defended himself. The Department of Education came out and defended themselves as well, even though they said that they aren't going to investigate this allegation that 2 8th graders beat up on a sixth grader and caused him to have a concussion, and the school tried to cover it up. They're looking into that right now.
I was going to say that is easy to trace. I mean, you've got medical records. I mean, you've got security records, even if they try to cover it up. I mean, that's easy
Things
to
like, I
trace.
also spoke with the local police department and asked them, have you guys ever had an issue like this before? Have you guys ever been called to the school? They said no.
Every school has issues. Do we know why, or do you have a sense, or is there anything out there that would suggest why that school was singled out?
I think it was because it was sort of a really, really interesting allegations being made. And it looked as if the story was being built in November, the way I'm sort of reading the article. I did talk to some of the teachers who did not want to give me their names. And they essentially said that the person who was quoted in the story was a known troublemaker. And
Somebody with an axe to grind against the school, potentially.
Right. And the thing is also the idea that, yeah, they did call the FBI, but it was an FBI hotline where you could just leave a message. It's not as if the FBI is going to go ahead.
You're saying they called the FBI. It wasn't like the FBI said, oh,
Right,
really?
yeah.
We're coming. We'll be right by.
Right.
Yeah.
It just, you throw these names around, these big agencies, they're like, oh, my God, this sounds serious, but...
Okay, we'll wait. If we do get Michael back, is he back?
I'm here,
back? Oh, there you are. I'm sorry we lost you, Michael. So I asked you such a direct question, and then you disappeared. Was it a hit job by the Post? What's your thoughts?
No, we stand by, Post stands by the reporting of its reporters. I'm on the editorial side, so have nothing to do with the news side. Our reporters do their job, and they do a fine job. They want what information they have and did a story. And we'll see how it turns out. But the truth of the matter really is, though, that MS Junior High School 80 is a bit of an academic disaster. It was a renewal school for good reasons. Yes, it's now been placed in the RISE program. It's got millions of dollars, and you've only seen a slight uptick in academic achievement. I mean, I believe our editorial wrote, a couple of years ago, 95% of the students didn't do well on their math exam, so now it's 80% who don't do well. I guess that's a change, but is that something?
It's nowhere near
want?
where we want to be.
Very few teachers are going to speak against their school. They like the position where they're in, and if their school closes, it means they lose their job. They have to move around and possibly have to look for an assignment at another school, and it's been kind of hard for teachers who've been accessed from renewal schools to land good positions at other schools. So of course it's they're looking at protecting the school and themselves. We'll see what the investigation turns out, but the Post stands by its reporters and its reporting, and I stand by the that we wrote.
I'm sure you would.
Program and the fact that MS-80 ought not to be considered a rising school because 80% of students who aren't doing well in math and reading, that's not satisfactory. That's not something New Yorkers want.
Right. I was going to ask you a follow-up about renewal, but when I saw the frown on David Cruz's face, I thought, I thought, so did you want to respond? I mean, because I thought of the same thing, that teachers would, in fact, defend the school because it's their jobs. It's
right, but bear in mind, I also spoke to parents as well, and they all were praising the school. They were really giving it a thumbs up.
Let me go back to Michael, because I know Michael in the Post has a thing about renewal schools. Now, I'm going to talk out of turn a little bit. I was contacted by some people whose schools in a South Bronx district, whose schools were on the closed school list, and one of the reasons given for closing the school was that the enrollment is down. But they said the city capped enrollment 2 years ago, so of course enrollment is down because we couldn't enroll any students. So I guess what I'm throwing out there, this whole close the schools renewal program, I personally do not believe it's a successful way of looking at schools, and there's other ways of improving schools. What does you or the New York Post think? Michael? Did he not hear me?
You cut out.
I'm sorry. So basically I was asking you to evaluate the renewal schools program.
Well, if readers have been following our editorials in reference to renewal, we don't like it. We believe renewal has been a farce. It's been wasteful, and we believe former Mayor Bloomberg and Joe Klein are on the right track, and Waldron are on the right track when it comes to walkout. We're looking at how you deal with schools that are not successful. They need to be closed, and they need to be reorganized with better leadership, and of course additional money, so that there can be academic improvement. But this Mayor de Blasio's plan and Farina's plan have not been, in our mind, satisfactory or effective.
I have a slightly different view, in my view, on these renewal schools. I'm not so quick to close them. I'd like to find out what is going on in the schools, and I would take a look at curriculums. I would back off the various core curriculums and find out creative ways to help young people develop and engage them and their parents in the schools, and that's what I would do. And this whole idea of closing schools, it targets schools. It puts a black mark on schools, which is not good for the community, the kids, or the parents. I would take a whole different look as opposed to this whole idea of closing. David, your thoughts on school?
You need to hold the adults responsible, and that would be the principal. And what bothers me is that principals have managed to escape on the bad state of our schools. We focus on the UFT and on their members, when I know, since my mom was a teacher for a long time, that the problems really begin at the top with the principal and the vice principal and their ability to get their teachers to perform and to follow the curriculum and encouraging parents and students to do well.
I want to give David a shot. My belief is that when you replace principals very often, you destabilize the school. David, your thought?
Well, I'm sort of wanting to arrive at the middle of like where both you and Michael stand on this. I think that you should give the principals at least some chance to try and turn a school around. I would say 2 years. At the end of the day, you evaluate whether or not the principal has actually done a good job to at least move the needle a little bit, and then deal with it. I'm actually, I'm for removing the administration. Leadership does start obviously from the top, and so your best bet is to actually remove the people who don't.
Listen, guys, we're going to extend the Bronx Buzz to a 4-hour show, and then we'll have enough time to get to everything that we have. This is the latest Norwood news. The New York Post, you can pick it up at the newsstand or get it online every day. Michael Benjamin, what fun to have you on the show, and thank you, and get back to work.
Tell your viewers to follow me on Twitter at SquarePegDem.
SquarePegDem. That's Michael Benjamin. And who better qualified to be a square peg than that guy? See you later, Michael. Thank you. David Cruz, NorwoodNews.org.
Thank you.
Great. Well, what a fun show. Guess what? We done. We out. See you next week. Good night.
Leaving hot coals improperly extinguished can cause a wildfire.
Hey guys, it's Smokey!
It looks as if Smokey is going to use the drown, stir, drown and feel technique. After the first drown, a good start. Next, another drink. And finally, a close feel.
Is it cool? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Smokey, catch! Oh, my bad, Smokey.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I get it.
Give it back!
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.